He didn't fire me because I was late. He didn't fire me because I broke a rule. He fired me because I brought a homemade turkey sandwich to work. And 3 months later, I'd be sitting across from a federal investigator uncovering the secret that was never supposed to leave that office. It was a Wednesday. The kind of ordinary day no one remembers until it becomes unforgettable. I had packed my own lunch. Not to prove a point, not to be difficult, just because I was tired of paying $18 for soggy catered pasta every day. That week, my mother had sent me leftover roast turkey, and I'd made a beautiful sandwich, cranberry chutney, sharp cheddar, a slice of lettuce on sourdough. Simple, satisfying mine. I walked into the break room like I always did, smiling, quiet, keeping to myself. And that's when Daniel, my boss, spotted it. He gave a dry laugh and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Bringing food from home now. Didn't realize we were running a soup kitchen." A few people chuckled. I didn't. I looked him straight in the eye and replied, "It's just lunch, Daniel." But it wasn't. Not to him, because in that office appearances mattered more than performance. And nothing said low-tier employee like a brown bag lunch. 2 days later, I was called into HR, no greeting, no small talk, just a printed document and a phrase I'll never forget. "This is a cultural fit issue." I blinked. A what? "We're pivoting toward a stronger brand alignment. There's concern that your recent behavior doesn't reflect the kind of image we want projected." I wanted to scream, to throw the sandwich in their faces. Instead, I nodded, signed the paper, and walked out with my lunch bag still zipped shut. That was the moment it all began, not when I was fired, but when I realized they never saw me as anything more than replaceable. But I wasn't disposable, I was observant, and I remembered things. Like how Daniel always insisted on handling vendor payments personally, like how the catering company billed the firm nearly $12,000 a month for executive meal plans for a team of 6, like how his assistant once whispered to me, "If anyone asks, I didn't see anything, it was just noise back then." Background details. But suddenly it was all starting to connect. You see, Daniel didn't care about my sandwich. He cared that it didn't go through his vendor, his fake invoices, his skimming scheme. My $5 lunch broke his illusion of control and gave me a front row seat to his secret, and I wasn't going to let that go. "I'm sorry, Dana, but we've decided to move forward with another candidate." It was the third rejection that week, the 15th that month, and I wasn't even getting to interviews anymore. Every time I sent out my resume, it felt like dropping it into a well. No echo, no reply. At first, I blamed the job market, then I blamed my age. But when I reached out to a recruiter I'd worked with before, her response made everything clear. She called me at night whispering like she was afraid someone might be listening. "Off the record, your former employer has been giving you a bad reference, said you were difficult to manage and didn't align with leadership values." Translation. Daniel was poisoning the well. I wasn't just fired, I was being erased. That night I pulled out an old planner I hadn't touched in months, the one I kept tucked away in my bottom drawer at work. It was filled with notes I'd written over the years. Observations, vendor invoices, meal delivery logs. Nothing dramatic until you looked closely. Why was our office paying a catering company weekly when lunch was only served on Tuesdays and Fridays? Why did the same 3 vendor names appear repeatedly on expense sheets with handwritten notes in Daniel's pen? Why did those vendors all trace back to the same P.O. box in Newark? Something was off and I knew it. So I started investigating. I reached out to Clara, a former finance assistant, who'd quietly left the company a year earlier. We met for coffee in a small cafe across town. "I knew something was wrong," she said, stirring her drink. "He asked me to process a duplicate invoice once and told me, 'Don't worry, it's all internal.' When I pushed back, I got pulled from client-facing accounts." "Did you report it?" She laughed bitterly. "To who? HR, they report to him. The board, they play golf together." Then she leaned in closer. "I'll tell you this, if you're digging, dig deep and be careful. He protects his secrets." That warning wasn't just for drama, because 2 nights later I got a text from a blocked number, "Stop now or you'll regret it." No signature, no follow-up, just a threat. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. For a second I felt fear rise in my throat like a fire. But it didn't last, because fear is a luxury I no longer had. They had taken my job, my reputation, my ability to walk into an interview without suspicion, and I was supposed to be scared. No, I was angry. And I was ready. So I did what they never expected. I contacted an old friend of mine, Melissa, now a staff writer at a business ethics publication. We'd worked on a small campaign years ago, and I remembered how she once told me, "If you ever have a real story, one that matters, call me." So I did. We met the next day. I brought her everything: the notes, the invoices, the screenshots, the whispers. She listened, asked questions, took notes. And when I finished, she said, "Daniel has no idea what's coming." And that's when I knew my silence had fed him for years. Now it would starve him. The story dropped on a Monday front page of a mid-tier business ethics blog. Yes, but by noon it was spreading like wildfire through LinkedIn, Twitter, and Slack channels across the industry. Exclusive executive catering fraud scheme, allegedly masked as employee wellness program. The lead photo, Daniel at a charity luncheon, smiling wide fork, midair. The irony was delicious. Melissa had done her job well. She didn't name me outright. She called me a former employee who brought documentation forward in good faith. But if you worked in our firm or knew Daniel at all, you didn't need a name. The article detailed it all. Inflated invoices from a shell catering company, duplicate payments routed through a dummy, LLC, perks billed under executive wellness programming that didn't exist. In total, over $480,000 siphoned off over 4 years, all under the noses of the board, HR, and accounting, and all protected until a woman with a homemade sandwich got in the way. By Tuesday, it was being picked up by industry watchdogs. The comments section exploded. "I always thought that guy was fake. Worked under him once. This tracks karma has a calorie count, and she just served him a full course meal." But while the internet feasted, I sat in silence. Not out of fear, out of clarity, because I knew it wasn't over. Wednesday morning, I got the call. Blocked number again, but this time it wasn't a threat. It was him. Daniel. His voice cracked on the second word. "You did this?" I said nothing. "You think this makes you a hero?" Still nothing. "I gave you that job. I brought you into this company." "No." I finally replied. "You gave me a reason to leave and a reason to speak." Silence. Then he hung up. That was the last time I ever heard his voice. By Friday, he was placed on administrative leave. By the end of the month, an internal audit was announced. Employees were instructed not to delete anything. IT locked down his devices, and a quiet panic swept the building. I watched it all unfold from the outside, free, jobless, but no longer voiceless. A recruiter who had ghosted me weeks earlier reached back out. "We'd love to explore some leadership opportunities with you. Your name's been popping up for the right reasons." The irony wasn't lost on me. I wasn't just re-entering the job market, I was re-entering it with truth on my side. One afternoon, I returned to that same cafe where I had met Clara, the woman who warned me I brought her flowers. "You were right," I told her, "but we weren't alone." She smiled. "We never are, just quiet until someone speaks." Daniel spent the next 3 months unraveling. His LinkedIn went dark. The firm issued a statement full of legal disclaimers, and the woman who was once ignored for eating lunch alone, she was now being called the whistleblower who exposed a silent empire of fraud. All because I brought lunch from home. All because he underestimated the one person who was never part of his game. I didn't burn his house down, I just stopped holding up the corner he built on lies. Some people say revenge is sweet, but mine, it was quiet, intentional, and it came with a side of cranberry chutney, because in the end I didn't yell, I didn't burn bridges, I just told the truth and let it do what it always does, expose the lies. 3 months after the article broke, the dust hadn't settled, it had cleared. And with it, so did the illusion that Daniel was untouchable. The company released a formal statement full of jargon and phrases, like internal miscommunication and reevaluating financial protocols. They didn't mention my name, but everyone knew. They knew who brought the receipts, who followed the numbers, who didn't back down. Daniel resigned quietly, citing personal reasons. His LinkedIn bio went from CEO and culture leader to open to new opportunities. And just like that, the man who once humiliated me for bringing lunch from home couldn't even show his face in public. He lost everything. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. I spent the next few weeks rediscovering parts of myself I hadn't seen in years. I planted herbs on my windowsill. I drank coffee slowly instead of gulping it between meetings. I took long walks without checking my phone. And then one morning I woke up with an idea. What if my story wasn't just about Daniel? What if it was about every woman who'd ever been talked over, passed up, or punished for making a choice that wasn't on brand? That's how my consulting business began. Lunchbox Strategies, a name that still makes people smile until they hear the story behind it. I didn't start it to get rich. I started it because I wanted to help people like me, people who stayed late, followed the rules, showed up early, and were still told, "You're not a fit." I worked with HR professionals who wanted real ethical frameworks, with small business owners who wanted to build culture without exploitation, with women rebuilding their confidence after years of being told they were too emotional, too intense, or too quiet. And you know what? Every single one of them had their own version of a sandwich moment, their own small human decision that made someone else feel threatened. One day I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name handwritten and a stamp. Inside was a typed note. "You probably don't remember me. I was the intern who watched what happened to you. I just got hired at a new firm, and I told them on day one, never again. Thank you." I read it twice, then I cried. Because sometimes we don't know who's watching when we stand up. Sometimes it's the person who's been taught to stay small. Sometimes it's the version of ourselves we forgot we were fighting for. I still bring lunch from home. Some days it's just leftovers and a banana. Some days it's gourmet. Most days it's simple. But every time I pack that little bag, it reminds me I once lost a job because of a sandwich. But I gained a voice I'll never give back. So if you're reading this or watching this and you've ever been punished for being different, if someone used power to silence you, if you were told that speaking up would ruin you, let me say this. You're not too much. You're not too loud. You're not wrong. They just weren't ready for someone who couldn't be bought, bent, or bullied. If someone ever tried to silence your truth, leave a comment below. Because when we speak up together, they can't erase us. Not anymore. And remember, your lunch, your voice, your story, they're yours, and they matter.